toutes et à tous, bonjour et bienvenue. Bienvenue à Saint-Malo, face à ce paysage magnifique. Je suis Anne Chevrel et je vais avoir le plaisir de vous accompagner tout au long de ces 2 journées de 360 possibles. Alors au programme, beaucoup de choses, comme lors des années précédentes, des reboot camps, des conférences, des masterclass, des ateliers, de la facilitation graphique, énormément de choses autour de la créativité et de l'innovation. Ce sont 2 journées qui vont donc nous aider collectivement à faire avancer notre réflexion sur l'innovation, sur ce que l'innovation ouvre en termes de possibles, à 360 degrés. On va explorer tout cela ensemble. Alors, pourquoi ce parti pris de l'innovation? Nous allons, lors de cette petite séance très courte d'ouverture, essayer de comprendre ce que nous faisons là. Tous, nous allons le faire avec Patrick Charpy, qui est vice-président en charge de l'emploi et du développement économique à Saint-Malo Agglomération, qui est aussi premier adjoint au maire de Saint-Malo. Nous allons le faire aussi avec Guy Canu, qui est le président de BDI, et Frédéric Roth, qui en est le directeur. Patrick, je voudrais commencer par vous, qui nous accueillez, Saint-Malo. Est-ce que ça a un sens particulier pour vous que 360 possibles s'installe cette année dans votre ville sur Saint-Malo?
Bien sûr, ça a un sens. Bon, tout d'abord, je voulais vous accueillir. Nous sommes très heureux que vous ayez choisi le Palais du Grand Large. En plus, à une époque de grande marée, là, donc vous allez pouvoir profiter pleinement du paysage marée haute, marée basse. Et puis par ailleurs, donc, le choix de ce thème est complètement en résonance avec ce qu'aujourd'hui nous développons sur le territoire de Saint-Malo. Nous avons décidé dans notre stratégie de développement économique de mettre en avant tous les outils pour faire de ce territoire un écosystème favorable à l'innovation, à l'expérimentation, avec le label French Tech que nous partageons avec Rennes Métropole, mais également la mise en place d'un dispositif d'expérimentation, à la fois sur de l'accompagnement et du financement, et puis des outils comme le parc catalan, le parc technologique, les pépinières d'entreprises technologiques que nous avons développés et qui aujourd'hui permettent d'affirmer qu'on est vraiment autre chose qu'un territoire purement touristique avec des belles plages et une belle mer, mais aussi un endroit où nous pouvons accueillir des entrepreneurs dans des domaines pointus que ceux qui sont représentés par le salon 360 possibles.
Guy Canu, c'était une évidence. Saint-Malo, après Rennes, après Brest, 360 possibles, devait venir ici.
Oh, une évidence, oui, il suffit de regarder en complément, mais c'est surtout une alternance de lieux par rapport à le positionnement Bretagne à BDI. Et puis l'ambition que nous avons au niveau de 360, cette ouverture sur le monde, en particulier sur le monde de l'innovation et de la découverte des techniques, des différentes techniques de l'innovation, avec souvent un côté un petit peu méconnu, qui permet, et on l'espère, à tous ceux qui sont en quête d'idées pour leurs projets à la fois personnels ou leurs projets économiques, ou ceux qui accompagnent les projets économiques, de leur offrir le maximum de réflexion et de repartir avec une idée pour leur projet. Voilà, et c'est évidemment un gros challenge que nous avons tous les ans. Nous sommes d'ailleurs aujourd'hui en passe de le réaliser, puisque après une première édition à Rennes, nous avions, je crois, 600, 700 personnes, 700. À Brest, l'année dernière, nous avons presque 1000, plus de 1000. Aujourd'hui, nous attendons plus de 1200 personnes. Donc voilà, Patrick, Saint-Malo est vraiment toujours attractif. Et pour cela, nous essayons nous basons sur 2 choses très, très courtes, mais quand même très importantes. C'est de faire venir une personnalité dont la notoriété est indéniable. Aujourd'hui, c'est Natalie Nixon, que je remercie de sa présence, qui vous sera présentée par Frédéric tout à l'heure. Nous avions eu Tim Hudson il y a 2 ans, Soshi Shiba, notre japonais. Tout ça, ça tourne autour du design thinking avec des variantes. Et nous espérons que les côtés pratiques, puisque c'est le côté pragmatique, découverte des ateliers, fera que chacun d'entre vous repartira avec la bonne idée.
De la réflexion, de l'expérimentation, de la découverte. J'imagine que pour un événement comme celui-ci, Frédéric, on ne travaille pas tout seul. Il y a beaucoup de partenaires qui sont avec vous.
Oui, complètement. D'abord, un petit mot pour dire que je suis vraiment ravi de vous accueillir aujourd'hui pour cette 3e édition, parce que ce n'était pas gagné. Il y a 2 ans, quand on est parti. 3e édition aujourd'hui, confortée par nos partenaires, que je remercie. presque de la première heure, puisque nous avons instauré ce partenariat il y a 2 ans. Et donc, je ne vais pas tous les citer, mais il y a ceux de la première heure. Il y a des petits nouveaux qui nous ont rejoints, un partenaire industriel local, le groupe Roulier, et puis partenaire avec les CCI depuis l'origine. Donc ça, très important, sans eux, ou avec eux plutôt, on ira plus loin, plus fort, et je suis certain que ça va continuer.
Chaque année, vous choisissez un thème qui est une sorte de fil rouge sur 360 possibles. Cette année, l'hybridation. Ça veut dire quoi et pourquoi ce thème-là?
Bonne question. Non, en fait, je crois qu'on sera tous d'accord pour partager le fait qu'on a plein de challenges à relever, que ce soit dans nos entreprises, dans nos parcours professionnels, dans nos parcours privés. Et on s'aperçoit que, et puis poussé par la révolution numérique, par tous ces outils là qui chamboulent nos activités, et on s'aperçoit qu'en croisant nos compétences, nos regards, nos parcours, nos expériences, qu'on met à profit ce partage sur la recherche de solutions à un problème, sur la recherche d'une nouvelle idée, d'un nouveau projet, eh bien, ça fonctionne plutôt pas mal, ça fonctionne plutôt plus vite, et c'est assez robuste. Donc l'hybridation des compétences, c'est tout simplement ça. Et quand on a découvert cela, on s'est dit, on ne peut pas garder ça pour nous, il faut le partager. Et donc c'est l'objectif 360 cette année.
Soyons extrêmement concrets, pragmatiques. Il y a beaucoup de propositions sur les 2 jours. Quand on est un visiteur, qu'on ouvre son dépliant, on fait comment pour choisir, pour s'orienter?
Alors, il y a un petit peu moins de propositions que l'année dernière. Si, ça se voit pas, mais un petit peu moins. Bon. La nouveauté, c'est qu'on vous propose aussi la notion de parcours en fonction de vos sensibilités. Un parcours RH, un parcours sur la stratégie de l'entreprise ou un parcours lié à la conduite de projet. Ceci dit, le thème, c'est l'hybridation. Donc moi, je vous invite à regarder ces parcours et à les hybrider et je pense que vous en tirerez le meilleur, n'est-ce pas ?
On en a parlé tout à l'heure. Pour ouvrir 360 possibles, nous allons pouvoir entendre dans quelques minutes Natalie Nixon. Elle est professeure et responsable d'un MBA Design stratégique à l'Université de Philadelphie. C'est une spécialiste du design de service qu'on appelle expérientiel, et puis c'est aussi une grande spécialiste du monde de la mode. Elle va partager avec nous cette hybridation entre 2 approches. Pourquoi Natalie Nixon ce matin ?
Alors, moi, je suis convaincu, avec l'équipe BDI, on est convaincu que les solutions de demain vont en partie venir de la pollinisation croisée. Alors, derrière ce mot, c'est quoi? C'est se servir des expériences des autres, pas forcément dans nos domaines à nous, et en retirer et voir comment ils fonctionnent. Natalie Nixon va nous proposer non seulement un peu de théorie, mais surtout beaucoup de pratique. De la pratique dans des univers qui sont challenging, parce que la mode, ça vous pousse en avant, on renouvelle les produits, etc. On peut dire
ça change tout le temps.
Ça change tout le temps. Alors certes, c'est peut-être un peu loin de l'industrie lourde, ou de l'industrie tout court. Mais justement, je pense qu'en écoutant et en regardant et en pratiquant, on va certainement apprendre beaucoup de choses. Mais plutôt que de parler de Natalie Nixon, je préférerais lui passer la parole le plus vite possible.
Alors justement, tout de suite, on va entendre Natalie Nixon, juste un mot sur l'organisation. Vous avez tous reçu des mails sur la façon dont allait se mettre en place ces 2 jours. Il y avait 2 grandes règles dans ce que Ronan Dolé et son équipe ont pu nous envoyer. C'était prendre du plaisir. Et le deuxième, c'était la ponctualité. Donc, on va se l'appliquer à nous-mêmes. Et on va laisser la parole à Natalie Nixon. Bonne journée et à bientôt.
Bonne journée à tous.
Merci. Bonjour. Good morning. Je ne le parle pas français, so I'm sorry in advance, and I will be mindful to speak in a steady pace, and I hope that you will get a lot out of my ideas and my thoughts today. So thank you so much for this invitation. I'm very appreciative to share with you on this day as you explore hybridization. And what better place to talk about hybridization, because as I understand it, Saint-Malo and Bretagne are known as a region of people who have said, we are not British nor French, but we are Bretagne, right? We are Saint-Malo. So what perfect example of this notion of hybridization, right? Of what I refer to as the remix. If you are at all familiar with hip-hop music and hip-hop culture from the United States of America, hip-hop is all about the remix. Hip-hop is all about creating something new by resampling and recombinations. And this idea of recombinations is the essence of creativity, and in my view, it's the essence of innovation. So let's talk about hybridization. I'd like to begin at the beginning. And this, of course, is one view of our universe, but it's also some of my beginning in terms of how I began to think about innovation and hybridization. Some years ago, when I was deeply engrossed in my doctoral studies, in my PhD studies, I came across this idea of chaotic systems. So what is a chaord? I didn't know myself. It's actually a made-up word. It's a word that combines two words. It combines the words chaos and order. And it was coined by D. Hock. D. Hock was the founder of Visa, the credit card company. And he kept getting promoted in the financial services industry, and he wasn't that excited about it. And he went for a walk in the woods, and he said, gosh, I keep getting asked to create these very complex human organizations, and why do we insist on making them full of hierarchies, and we diagram them as boxes with arrows, when all around me in nature, nothing looks like that. So in a forest, a seedling falls down into the ground and a new sprout grows up. If we hurt ourselves, if I hurt my knee or my elbow, there isn't a string of commands up to the brain to say, heal, right? These are self-organizing, emergent, adaptive systems. And D. Hock said, what if, probably the two most important words in the English language, what if, question mark, what if we could devise human organizations that were also self-organizing, emergent, and adaptive systems? And he called them chaotic systems. So let's really think about all the ways we could expand this notion of chaotic systems. It's about recombinations of the old and the new. It's about recombinations of the analytical and the intuitive. It's not separating them, but it's conjoining them. It's integrating them and bringing them together. And it's about bringing together business and the personal. So what I would like to do this morning is give some context about design, give some context about design thinking. And I know a lot of you are familiar with design thinking. There's so many good resources around design thinking. I'm going to give you some of my perspective on that. And I'm going to end with 3 concrete examples of businesses that are admittedly based in the United States, but I think they will be examples and hopefully some inspiration for you about tactical, practical, applied ways to apply design and design thinking for innovation. So what are we about the business of today? It's a very complex terrain that we're trying to navigate. Some call this sense-making, right? It's very ambiguous. We are trying hard to tell the future. So let me start with some ideas and some thoughts about the future of work. We're not clear about it. We have a lot of ideas. Sometimes in the past, we've thought maybe the future of work will be a nomadic life, one where we can spend some time at home, some time at work, and certainly we're already seeing that technology is allowing us to split our ways like this. Maybe the future of work means a totally casual work environment. And we certainly know that space matters. The environments in which we work drive our thought processes, drive the ways that we connect with one another. Research shows that this is not the complete answer. Just because we get rid of walls and get rid of cubicles does not mean that all of a sudden we will become more innovative. That's not the answer either, but we're getting a little closer. There are a lot of drivers that have caused us to revisit and re-examine the future of work. One driver is what we in the United States call the gig economy or the sharing economy. This is a business model, this is a multi-sided business model pattern, and it's based on this idea of a hub. The opportunity is when you see two entities in the marketplace that you can bring together. So whether that's Airbnb or Uber, this is a huge opportunity. It's very interesting to note that this is actually not new. And so much of what we're talking about is not new, it's just the way we're trying to optimize it and monetize it. Design thinking is not actually new, it's the way we are applying design thinking, it's the way we're applying some of the principles of design thinking. So one driver that's forcing us to re-examine the future of work is the sharing economy. Another driver is triple bottom line sustainability. Right? So we have to be mindful as we grow our businesses, no matter what the size, whether they're sole proprietor businesses, huge multinationals, we have to be mindful of people, profit, and planet. Probably about even 10 years ago when we talked about sustainability, we only talked about environmentalism. Now we understand that sustainability has to have a responsibility to the people working within the company, to the people to whom we sell our products and services, as well as to a fiscal responsibility. And how many companies have been getting in trouble and have had problems because they have not balanced these three. So triple bottom line is also a driver. And finally, the Internet of Things. The hyperconnectivity between, if you wear a Fitbit on your wrist, that's moderating your heartbeat, how much you sweat, to traffic light signals, messaging back to the office. We're entering soon a world where there will be this hyper-connectivity. So all of these drivers, the Internet of Things, triple bottom line sustainability, and the sharing economy mean we have to, it's an imperative that we revisit the future of work. Ultimately, what we are all trying to do is attain more power. And I love this definition of power. This definition comes from the British philosopher Bertrand Russell, and he was known for having said that power is the ability to produce intended effects. The ability to produce intended effects. Whenever we have been in a place or space where we do not feel empowered, it's because we haven't had the agency or the ability to produce the intended effects. And this is really what people want in the way that they work, whether they are the secretary or the president of the company. So how do we make this possible in our organizations? Well, I came across this article a couple of years ago in the Harvard Business Review, and it's called Understanding New Power. It's by two gentlemen, Hymans and Timms, and I quickly became enraptured with their ideas because they really aligned with my work on creativity, where I talked about chaotic systems thinking, and I looked a lot at improvisation. An improvisational system is a chaotic system. If you think about jazz music, right? There is both chaos and order. The order comes with the structure, minimal structures. The chaos comes with the beauty and the magic that happens in between all of those moments. So the power of chaotic systems is that it's not about anarchy, right? It's about randomness and allowing randomness to happen in our organizations. And order is not about control, because people would suffocate and die slowly. Order is about having boundaries. What I learned from reading about understanding new power is that there were a lot of parallels between how they were defining new power and what I had learned in my research on improvisational organizations. So for example, they identified the following as old power values. For how many of you is this list familiar? How many of you have companies or work in environments where there's authority, exclusivity, hyper-competition, specialization, discretion? I do. I work in higher ed. Higher education, the university system, this is it, right? Hyper-specialized, very authoritative, based on a lot of competition. What we are saying is that this is not the future. We have to align our organizations, higher education, healthcare and medicine, law. We have to align our organizations in a way that looks not so much like this, but more like this. And new power values are about informality, open source information. It's collaborative. There's radical transparency, self-organizing. If you recall when I talked about chaotic systems, there's self-organizing, adaptive, emergent systems. How do we get our companies and our organizations to resemble much more of this? So I began thinking and writing about this a bit. I write and blog for Inc.com, and I spoke to a friend of mine named Heather McGowan. And Heather also does a lot of thinking and work around the future of work. Excuse me. And one of the important things she said from our interview was that the worker's value is no longer based in what she knows, but based on the speed at which she can learn and apply. This is an unsettling shift. Learning must be irrefutably lifelong. So I submit that those companies that are capable of being agile and adaptive in learning and allow their employees to do the same will be at a far advantage. And hybridization is one of the ways we can get there. So here's a really interesting diagram that Heather made. She said, this is the old view of advancing in your career. You go to school, you get a job, you get promoted, you climb up the ladder, you get a nice pension at the end, you retire by age 65, 66. This probably will not happen for me. This is the old economy. How about the new reality? The new reality for some people looks terrifying, right? It's up and down and up and down. But for others, it's a huge opportunity because it's really talking about multiple points of engagement. So what's the lesson here? What are we really saying? We're saying that we must be adaptive, resilient, curious, open source problem solvers. And that actually is the capacity for which we should be hiring. Less about the old titles, but more about mindset. Mindset is critical to everything because mindset affects behavior, which affects culture, which affects the environment in which our companies can grow and expand in. So why am I convinced that design is one of the ways we can go about building a much more hybrid world and more hybrid environments for our companies? Well, the first reason why I believe design is an imperative tool to use is because of the environment and terrain in which we all must work in. Whether you are a professor in higher education, which is getting disrupted every day by edX and YouTube and Wikipedia, right? Or you work in the financial services, or in governments, or utilities, all of us are trying to compete in environments that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. VUCA environments. And this mnemonic actually comes from the US military when we first entered Afghanistan. There are so many things in USA corporate America which we borrow from the military. I'm not sure what to think about that. But when our military first entered Afghanistan, for obvious reasons, the terrain was volatile, it was uncertain, it was complex, and it was ambiguous. This is not going away. So the first reason I think design is a really useful reference is because designers are change agents. Designers are change agents. Designers get to shape the way we move through this world. They get to shape the way we navigate our everyday lives. Whether we're talking about products and objects, how many of you are familiar with OXO? So OXO is a really interesting story. The OXO design is connected to the design strategy consultancy Smart Design. The gentleman who started Smart Design, OXO, bless you, he said he had a real challenge at home. His wife was struggling with arthritis. So she wasn't able to hold a spatula, a spoon, a knife in a comfortable way. It was getting harder and harder. So he worked on this challenge and redesigned the way what a tool might look like for a person who doesn't have flexibility in the hands. This is a great example of what we call universal design. Universal design is a principle that's been applied to designing for differently abled people, people who have physical restrictions on their bodies. But what's beautiful about universal design is that when we design for the least amongst us, we actually design a better solution. So this is one example of how designers are change agents. Designers get to shape the way we move through this world. Another example, fashion. I have a background, my background is in anthropology and fashion, and people so often, I don't know the French for this, but they poo-poo on fashion. They say, oh, fashion is just a frilly whatever. Fashion is one of the most complex, intensely logistic businesses you'll ever want to engage in. And fashion and apparel are significant examples of design as change agents because on a practical level, our clothing protects us from the environments and the elements. But fashion also affects the way we feel. Fashion affects power and status and semiotics and symbol. So this is another important example of design as a change agent. The third example is architecture and buildings and structures. So this here in Saint-Malo, there is I understood that from Honan when he was driving me through yesterday, that so much of Saint-Malo was destroyed after World War II. And there was so much work to restore the architecture to its original state, which is so important because it evokes a sense of place, right? So here's an example in Spain of the Bilbao Museum. But what I love about this photograph is that it shows the mixture between the new and the old, the juxtaposition between the new and the old. So architecture, fashion design, product design, we can see how these are all examples of design as change agents. Reason number two that I think design is so critical. Design is a method of inquiry. And if you begin to understand design in this way, I encourage you to embrace and adopt design into the way you work. I'm not here today to say that design thinking or design is the one and only thing that every company should do. No, I think it is a tool. I personally am convinced that it is a more meaningful and productive tool in this VUCA environment to add in to the other tools that you may be using, whether that is lean or agile. It's one additional tool. So what do I mean that design is a method of inquiry? Designers get to ask the question, what if? What if? What if one day we had cars that didn't need gas, but you plugged it into a wall? Imagine how crazy that sounded 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But it's a reality today, right? So giving permission to ask what if is a huge power of design. And design also integrates quantitative research methods with the qualitative. The quantitative data gives us the bird's eye view. Quantitative, the numbers, they show us the patterns, but they don't explain why. Qualitative data goes deeper. Qualitative explains, well, we see this concentration, evidence of X, but why are people behaving in that way? We need the qualitative research to delve down, and that's what design allows us to do. Larry Keeley is the founder of a design strategy firm in Chicago, and I'm not sure what the translation is in French, but in English it's awesome. Design is the art and science of cutting cubes out of fog. It really speaks to the ambiguity that we have to get comfortable with, and the design is well equipped to tackle. And if you can get your arms wrapped around understanding that, then you're a little farther ahead than I am. But I really love this statement. Design is the art and science of cutting cubes out of fog. So that's design, right? What is design thinking, which we hear so much about? I drew a circle around the head of the gentleman on the left. His name is Herb Simon. And Herb Simon has been known by many as the grandfather of artificial intelligence. And Herb Simon was famous for having said that design is really a way of thinking. So we really can credit Herb as expanding the notion of design and talking about design thinking. And I hereby anoint all of you as designers because of this much more open, expansive definition. In my view, design thinking is a problem-solving process. That's the easiest, simplest way to put it. Design thinking is a problem-solving process. And if you apply the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule, we spend 80% of our time framing the problem. Did we even ask the right question before we go running down a rabbit hole full of assumptions? I started a new type of MBA program at Philadelphia University 3 years ago. And one of the goals I had was to creatively disrupt graduate business education. Most business school education is solutions-oriented. It's about having the answer yesterday and then charging ahead and solving the problem. It's a very different orientation in design thinking. It's much more process-oriented. So we spend 80% of our time challenging our own assumptions, asking a question, reframing it, reframing it, reframing it. Did we even ask the right question? Is that actually what the people who are buying our products and services need? How do we know? Have we gone out and asked them? So being a problem-solving process, emphasis on process is really significant about design thinking. So here's how I've defined design thinking. I actually wrote a book about this. If you're interested, let me know later to learn more about the book. But I say that design thinking transfers the problem-solving method and process that designers use, which is about the design of the tangible, chairs, sweaters, buildings. And we transfer that problem-solving process to the design of the intangible, to the design of services and processes and experiences. And in a service economy and in a creative economy, that has become more and more critical. So we start with empathy. Now in business, that's a little bit radical, right? Most businesses want to start with profitability, operational efficiencies, productivity. But we start with empathy. We are hyper focused on the people who are buying our stuff. What are their needs? And we assume that if we have figured out what their needs are, we will be profitable, we will be productive, and we will be efficient, right? We have that outside in, inside out perspective. In theory, design thinking looks something like this. It would be a nice, neat, linear process, right? You start with observing phenomena, you brainstorm some ideas, you prototype a solution, and voila, you implement your solution, right? That's theoretical. If only it were so easy. In reality, this is what it's like. And this is life, right? It's a bit messy, it's a bit chaotic. So why not learn tools and frameworks and processes that help us to navigate that ambiguity? It's not a straight line. We go in and out and back and forth, and we revisit what could be the possible multiple scenarios for the people who are buying our products and services. We do a lot of divergent thinking. We think big sky, blue sky, what if, and then we have to get very practical. We have to make very tactical decisions based on budgets, based on policies that are in place, based on headcount and talent that we have. Do we have the people around to actually execute on our ideas? And this is a framework. In design thinking, we work a lot with, we call these maps. I love this map because it really speaks to, in whatever work that you do, you're always solving a problem on the functional level, the social level, and the emotional level. If you think deeply of your company, whatever business you work in, are you sure you understand the problem you are solving for your customer on the functional level? Probably, right? We get really fixated on quality control and the bells and whistles and the functional attributes of our products, right? Does the chair work? Will the person fall if they sit on it? Great. Okay. That's the functional level. The social problem that we're solving. What's the point of a chair? Is it to help people connect in a much more comfortable setting? And then the emotional problem, sorry, that we're solving for our customers. So I'll take my work as an educator. On a functional level as a professor, I have to teach, I have to develop curriculum, I have to serve on committees, I have to research, I have to write. Okay. On the social level, what problem am I solving? I'm trying to build an intellectual community among my peers and for my students. On an emotional level, the problem I'm solving is to change lives through ideas. And that's really why I show up for work. It's for that emotional problem that I'm solving. It's for that social problem. So whatever the work is that you do, ensure that you understand the job that you're solving on each of those three levels. So this was really good news to me when last fall, September 2015, the Harvard Business Review made design thinking on its front pages. They dedicated their entire issue to design thinking. And I was consulting with an accounting department in a major cable entertainment company. And the gentleman with whom I was working, he called me up and he said, I was running through the airport and I saw on the cover of Harvard Business Review, they're talking about design thinking. So it really is a thing. And I said, yes, it really is a thing. So for a lot of us, once an iconic institution like Harvard Business School says, you know, this is real, people begin to fall in line. So that's great. But what's also interesting about this issue is that it pointed out that some of the major American management consultancies, Accenture, McKinsey, Deloitte, they have all acquired design strategy firms. Why? Because they realize they need more than just a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to understand the need and deliver value to the customer. They have to dig a little deeper. So they've acquired these design strategy firms. They're still at the early stages, so they haven't fully integrated them, but this is a great step in a good direction. Financial services has been completely disrupted by a lot of upstarts. One of the most recent blogs that I wrote for Inc. is about these fintechs. I don't know the word in French, but in English, we talk about financial technology startups. We see a lot of them in San Francisco, in the Silicon Valley. They are completely disrupting the big major banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Fidelity Bank, right? Because what they are doing, whether it's Cash, which was a spinoff of Square, Venmo, Stash, and even Google has gotten to this business, Google Wallet. They have realized that with the use of humor, building community, and ease of use through design, they are capturing an entirely new group of people who want to not only save money, but invest and grow their money. Now, what's interesting is that more and more highly regulated industries, so higher education, financial services, healthcare, are trying to integrate design. So Fidelity Bank, which is based in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, is a big bank. Not so sure if you know of it here, but it's huge for us. They have a vice president of design thinking, which I was really delighted to hear because it shows this investment in new mindsets within a pretty traditional company. I also wanted to show another example of mixing old and new. I mentioned that I have a background in anthropology and fashion. Years ago, I worked in global fashion sourcing. Sourcing is the aspect of the fashion business where you're figuring out how do we make this top at the lowest cost, highest quality, and shortest lead time. So I worked on Victoria's Secret account, making bras and panties. And I lived and worked in Sri Lanka and Portugal, and I traveled throughout Asia. And I began to see a very interesting shift and transition in the manufacturing processes. So the traditional way of manufacturing is a very linear system. It's called the unit production system. So if I was working on a factory line, I would be responsible for every single day for doing the same operation over and over and over again. It's not a job full of passion. It doesn't require my full self to show up, but it does drive efficiencies. This is a classic example of answering the functional problem for employees, but not the social or emotional, right? But high efficiencies, and it makes sense for high volume orders. The other transition we began to see is something called modular manufacturing. And the difference is that in modular manufacturing, instead of long rows of employees doing the same thing every single day, if I worked in a factory with modular manufacturing, I would be trained on 3 to 5 different techniques. I would be called on to lead my team. First of all, I would be working as a team. I wouldn't be paid on just the amount of collars that I attached to a shirt. I would be paid based on how well my group performed. And that's a very different model. So this is another example of a manufacturing industry that has tried to integrate and shift away from a very linear process to an integrative process based on teaming. So this is the world we live in, right? The challenge is, how do we unravel this ambiguity? How do we ravel what often feels so nebulous, right? How do we get to the point where we have this nice clarity at the end? Well, there's 4 principles that I'd like to highlight about design thinking. They are empathy, lateral thinking, prototyping, and story. I'm going to go quickly through examples for each and what I mean. Empathy. Empathy is about having human conversations. I'm not talking about surveys for market research. I'm not talking about focus groups, because focus groups are limited. Focus groups, if I'm in a room with 10 other people, and I'm asked to comment on, going back to the chair, how do you like this chair? Is it a good chair? Would you ever buy this chair? I might think it's a horrible chair. But if everyone else in the room is saying it's a great chair, we have sheep mentality, right? I'll say what everyone else is saying. So the data is flawed. I'm talking about interviews, observations, looking someone in the eye and having a conversation with them about your product, your service, or your experience. It's a very different process. It requires you to get out of the building, out of the 4 walls of your office or your boardroom, and onto the ground. Talk to people. Observe how they are interacting with your company's products and services. The second principle, lateral thinking. Sometimes I call this related worlds thinking. Lateral thinking is the ability to connect the dots between seemingly disparate areas. So, for example, are any of you familiar with this restaurant, the Cheesecake Factory? It's a classic American restaurant, not the best healthy food, big plates food, right? But it's very popular in the United States. This is what it looks like, huge. There is a writer, he's a physician, he's a doctor. His name is Atul Gawande. And he also writes for the New Yorker magazine. About 3 years ago, he published an essay called What Hospitals, Healthcare, Can Learn from the Cheesecake Factory Restaurant. Here was his point. If you ever go to the kitchen of the Cheesecake Factory restaurant, it looks crazy. If you've never worked in a restaurant, it looks like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. However, the Cheesecake Factory restaurant delivers consistent service and product every single night. His point was that if you have ever had to go to the emergency room in a hospital, I'll speak for the United States, it feels crazy. It feels chaotic. It feels like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Here was his point. What if you connected the dots between two seemingly disparate areas, between healthcare and restaurants? What could doctors and physicians learn from the restaurant industry for customer service and efficiencies? So that's lateral thinking. The third principle is prototyping. Prototypes are rough draft, ugly mock-ups. The uglier, the better. Because you want to test your ideas when it's still half-baked, when you still have lots of questions. Here's the challenge and the problem that so many companies do. Many companies wait until they have the final, perfect version of their product and service, and then they test it. After they've spent millions of dollars sometimes. Our governments do this, big business does this, and then they're shocked when the product or service falls flat because they didn't test the idea in small, iterative stages. So in the United States, the financial services industry is doing this, right? So they use something called pop-up shops. Fashion uses pop-up shops a lot. So in the middle of the street, they place a mock-up version of a business and they ask people to interact with it before they've completely finalized the idea. This is a way that you can start to get feedback and data on concepts. Higher education is trying this as well. This is from Stanford University just outside of San Francisco. They started to say, what if we started to test new classes by just inserting them for 2 days, 3 weeks, a couple of hours? What type of feedback would we get? My point is, you can prototype services. You can prototype processes. You can prototype experiences before they are fully complete. My fourth principle is story. Stories are truth-telling. Stories are the way that we connect with each other. And it's no coincidence that the most innovative brands today have short films that have gone viral on YouTube. I'm thinking about Chipotle. I'm thinking about Taiwan Chinese Bank. Stories also can be collected from your frontline employees. They are the people who constantly interact with the consumers. Here's an example of a story that Dove tells very well.
So do you like your hair?
No.
You don't like your hair?
I want my hair to be straight because when you have your hair straight, it's really smooth.
Do you think that's more beautiful?
Yeah. Doesn't really feel good to have curly hair. I try to make it straight, but it doesn't work. I try to do this, but it doesn't work.
Sometimes I just wish I could just rip it out, but I'm not gonna do that.
I think about my hair that I don't want it anymore.
That feeling makes me sad sometimes when I leave out my hair.
Hey now, honey, you know you're amazing every day. Let your hair loose and play. Don't hide your curls away. Oh, I love it, love it. Oh, I love it, love it. Oh, I perfect this way.
So, what's the point of showing you this? It's not to make you sad and, oh, those little girls are so cute. It's to learn a lesson about a major consumer products company that sells soap, shampoo, lotion, and they're telling stories about the emotional problem that they're solving for their customers, the social problem, so that they become first of mind the next time I walk into a drugstore or supermarket and deciding what type of soap or shampoo I'm going to buy. So stories are human truth-telling, and they're critical in the design thinking process. So why does design make us more hybrid? Fundamentally, it helps us with the way we begin to work together. And there's a term that Jerry Hirschberg, who was a designer at Nissan, liked to use called creative abrasion. Creative abrasion was his process of forming teams when he was chief designer of the automotive company Nissan. He would purposefully make teams of people who might argue a little bit, who didn't agree on process, who came from engineering and accounting and design. And was the insight that he had, which was so important. Usually when we think about friction, we think friction is negative. We want to avoid friction. But fundamentally, what is friction? Friction is energy, right? So he said, if I can figure out multiple ways to spark energy among my employees, I'm going to do it because it's going to lead to many more innovative, creative solutions. I had the pleasure of attending a reception for this man, Bruce Mau. Bruce Mau recently received a major award from the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. And Bruce Mau is known for talking about enterprise design. He says that we have to think about the highest level of design thinking is about designing our enterprises. So here's something he said that night, just a couple of months ago in October. He said that new wicked problems need new wicked teams. What's a wicked problem? A wicked problem is a problem that is hard to solve with a linear process. How do we end poverty? What's the end of HIV/AIDS? How do we make sure that every child in the world gets access to an excellent education? These are wicked problems. They are complex problems where there is no easy entry point or exit point. His statement that new wicked problems need new wicked teams is a call to action for the way we are organizing our companies. And he had a wonderful exhibit, which I encourage you to see, and just check out his website or his blogs. So basically, he's talking about, Jerry Hirschberg, Bruce Mau, they're talking about designing more chaotic systems into our organization. So I'd like to leave you with three practical, tangible examples of companies, different types of companies that are practicing this. My first example is from a company called A&G. A&G is based in Boston, Massachusetts. Whoops. And they recently acquired a tinier digital media agency in Philadelphia. So now it's in a couple of different cities in the United States. And they came up with an idea of doing something called Dolphin Tank. You've heard of Shark Tank, right? Shark Tank is very aggressive. Dolphin Tank was this idea that was actually inspired by Google. Years ago, Google used to do something called 20% time, where they would give their employees 20% of their work time to devote to tinkering, experimenting on a project that they were interested in. Nothing to do with work, nothing to do with Google. One of the outgrowths of allowing their employees this time was Gmail. Gmail was actually a result of an experiment that employees tried. So A&G, they said, why don't we, I should also mention, Google no longer does 20% time, but the point is, they once did, and it led to something really cool. But A&G said, what if we did a version of that? So last year, A&G created Dolphin Tank, and here's how it worked. They said to their employees in their Boston office and the Philadelphia office, small digital agencies, hey, we know that you have tons of good ideas. We know that every day there are things that we do that you don't agree with. You actually have something that you've been working on and thinking about. We want to have 3 stages of a competition internally, and we're going to get it down to the final 6 finalists. And I was a judge. I participated as a judge on the final 6 ideas, and they were amazing. Now, here's what was so cool about this. This was internal innovation of engaging employees, and they gave them the time, and they also incentivized them and said, we will invest in your idea. So the flip of this, the shift here, is that instead of looking externally for research and development, they said, let's look internally. We know we have a wealth of talent and innovation with our own employees. And they actually have raised 2 of the ideas to first-level funding. So that's my first example, Dolphin Tank. My second example comes from a huge petroleum company, Sunoco. Now, we all know that companies like Sunoco are being scrutinized because they haven't always been mindful of triple bottom line. One of the partnerships that Sunoco started to make years ago was with NASCAR, the racing organization, which, as you in Europe know, it's not as big in the United States, but race car driving is huge throughout Europe. And they said, what if we tried to connect to our customers? Now, we sell gas, boring, huge, environmental hazards. But what if we tried to connect to our customers on the level of experience? So there's 2 ways that they did this. The first way, and actually I'm showing them out of order, but the first way is they developed a cologne, a perfume that smelled like petroleum. Now, why would they do this? They went to people at NASCAR, at racing events, and they asked them, what is it that you like about this experience? Why do you go? They did interviews, they did observations, they visited people at home, and the thing that they saw over and over, that they heard, people love that smell. It stayed with them when they came home. And Sunoco partnered actually with A&G, and they made a limited edition of petroleum-inspired scented cologne. Now, what was the point of that? It was never for sale. They would give it out at certain events. It showed a couple of things. Number one, it showed that they were attuned to their customers beyond petroleum, beyond gasoline. They understood the why behind people's motivations. The second experiment that they did was around sound. And if you look online, if you go to essenceofracing.com, they allow co-creation of music through the sounds that come from the racetrack. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about shifting away from a focus on product to experience, to really connect to people. So I'm going to show you 2 30-second examples. The first is sound.
Graham Rahal grabs the lead.
You'll see the white flag.
Graham Rahal.
You'll see the white flag. You'll see the white flag. There's the checker.
Sunoco, the essence of racing.
Okay. The second example is scent.
Hold me in the shadows, my heart ablaze. Hold me in the starlight. Escape with me. Bernd Robert, the essence of racing.
And they tried to have a French accent. Bernd Robert was the name of the cologne. So the point is, there's a whole emerging area of design on experience design, sensorial design. In a saturated marketplace, you have to find other means of connecting to people on a human level. My final example of applying design as strategy for more hybrid solutions is Work Bar at Staples. I've been told here in France, kind of a similar store is Office Depot, right? I don't know about you, but every time I walk into a retail environment, it's a little sad, right? Retail is really starting to die down. When people walk into a retail store, it's really to take a picture, look it up later on the internet. There's this whole new phenomenon called web rooming that's being done. So retail is really struggling. And Staples is an office supply store. Most of the time when you go into Staples, it's kind of empty. Maybe you go in there to buy a printer cartridge, but you don't really hang out. Well, again in Boston, Massachusetts, this company, Work Bar, partnered with Staples. And they said, you guys have a lot of space. We are a co-work share space, right? We're one of these places where people can lease days, weeks, months to do their work if they're freelancers. What if we partnered and recombined? And they did. And so what they've done is they've created a social work environment where people are getting their work done. P.S., if they have to ship something, if they need some additional office supplies, they can go right into Staples. So what are the lessons here in these three examples? The case for design is really the case for hybridization, for the remix. So here are the last final lessons I wanted to leave you with as I conclude. The first lesson and takeaway that I hope that you will try and experiment with is to work inside out. We saw that in Dolphin Tank. Delve internally into your company. What are the resources and creative ways you can drive innovation by asking the people who work for you? This requires empathy and prototyping. The second lesson, build not only the product, but build the experience. So Sunoco, they invite people to come online. Create your own music with all our sampling of sounds. Try the Sunoco Parfum, Bernd Robert. What do you think of it? We won't even sell it, right? It's not about the functional problem that they're solving. It's about the social and emotional problem. That, again, requires prototyping and story. And finally, look for new and unexpected partners. I hope that throughout these 2 days, you will connect with people who you've never talked with before. And you, from that, might grow new, exciting partnerships that may seem completely bizarre at the beginning, but actually will create nice synergy. And this uses the design thinking principle of lateral thinking. And finally, I want to leave you with a framework that I've developed, that I've been working with, that may be some food for thought. In my view, hybridization design strategy starts with curiosity. And embedded in that is an iterative process where we rely on our intuition and intuitive leadership. And what is intuition? It's basically pattern finding and pattern recognition. It's that I felt this way for a reason, something told me. Improvisation, and that leads to impact and intent. So thank you so much for your time. Merci. And I hope that you've left with some really great tools. Thank you so much. Good. Okay.
Does it work? Yes. Thank you very much, Natalie. That was very, very, very passionate. Bonjour à tous. Merci beaucoup d'être là. Ça démarre. Vous avez entendu Nathalie. Voilà. Maintenant, pour mettre tout ça en œuvre, il y a un programme qui est très complet, très dense. Donc là, on va séparer la salle en 3 espaces. Vous allez donc, s'il vous plaît, vous écarter, rendre vos casques, soit ici, soit au fond, là-bas. Juste une information. Vous avez une expérimentation avec des entreprises locales qui ont monté un programme avec des vélos. Donc il y a en bas dans le hall la possibilité d'aller tester le programme Terra Vélo. Donc si vous voulez faire une petite échappée pendant la journée ou demain, vous pouvez aller prendre des vélos et faire un petit tour de Saint-Malo qui a été prévu pour vous. Il y a aussi un concours photo. Vous avez vu que c'est le fluo, la thématique avec nos t-shirts. Celui qui fait la photo avec du fluo et la thématique de 360 possibles, avec le plus de likes sur Twitter, remportera un skate de chez Woody Art. C'est une petite planche de cruiser qui a été faite main à côté d'ici. C'est de l'orfèvrerie du skateboard. Voilà, donc maintenant, rendez-vous tous dans vos salles de réunion, de conférences et d'ateliers et passez une excellente journée. Merci beaucoup à tous, à tout à l'heure.